In Simon Jackman, who joins us for the first time as Professor at the University of Sydney after his old role, of course, at the US Studies Centre. Simon Jackman, thanks for your time as ever. Interesting story on oil for Joe Biden. So where do you see as the motivations here? Mainly about domestic supply, and that, of course, feeds into price and inflation, or a strategic element in terms of Russia?
Well, it's the politics of it too, Tom. And it's good to be with you in my new capacity, but it's about the politics substantially. Biden's numbers are still, they haven't moved an inch through this whole Ukraine crisis, where I think to the rest of the world, it looks like the US is doing what Biden said he wanted to do, and that's restore it to a position of leadership, rallying the democratic world in to assist Ukraine. But back home, gas prices, as that report just indicated, are incredibly high. My old state of California, where I lived for about 20 years, over $6 a gallon, many parts of California at the moment. Those domestic economic issues are his big drama at the moment. Republicans are also coming at him with another set of issues that their constituencies are very animated by, and our research at the US Studies Centre sort of was all over that. We were finding that repeatedly, immigration and crime. So Biden is looking for a domestic sort of sugar hit, if you will, from releasing, 1 million barrels a day for 180 days. That's about 5% of the daily oil consumption inside the United States. So it's not nothing. But Tom, the other thing to point out is that the United States has a strategic petroleum reserve that's tapped. It's a remarkable thing, Tom. Something that we in Australia, I think, have talked about for a long time, particularly through a national security lens more than an economic security lens, and something that behind closed doors, Americans will occasionally give Aussies a poke in the chest about. And you remember that the Australian government, seeking to sort of shore that up, actually got an assurance from the United States that part of their strategic petroleum reserve had reserved for Australia stamped on it, virtually, metaphorically. And even at 180 million barrels going out of that reserve, Tom, it's immense. The most they can pull from it is 5 million barrels a day, and even going at full tilt like that, it would take them well about 9 months to drain the thing. That's how big it is, and how seriously the United States has taken energy security sort of over the Cold War and now beyond.
But it shows, surely, that when we think about this issue of fuel security, it's never just a national security issue. It's always going to come with an economic tie. If you're needing petrol suddenly, guess what? The price has spiked. I was interested, you mentioned Australia and getting poked in the chest. Labor had a bit of an allusion to this the other day, that they'd make sure it was actually accessible. So not talking about having our own physical supplies here, but maybe something, closer in our region? And then is that complicated by maybe a Solomon Islands base by China in future years?
Absolutely, Tom. And it's something that, the strategic affairs community here in Australia agonises about repeatedly. Look, we were only a few years ago, I forget the exact time, Tom, but we rely so much on imported petroleum that if something just goes wrong at one of the import terminals, we very quickly get down to, we were within apparently 36 or 48 hours of not being able to refuel aircraft at Tullamarine in Melbourne a couple of years ago. You look at the statistics put out by the Australian government on how much supply we've got. We typically run in a just-in-time inventory model coming out of Asian ports typically. And I think when the more hard-headed sort of worst-case scenario contingencies we look at suggest that if something went pear-shaped in the region, there was a naval blockade or getting through the straits around Singapore, Indonesia, getting that supply to Australia, we'd be in a pickle very, very quickly. Defence has taken on board that very seriously and has secured its own supplies, but I think we are a long, long way from having sort of the energy assurance that I think is commensurate with all the other ways we talk about resilience and sovereign capability. The real, I think, missing piece of the puzzle there is our energy security. going forward? And is that the form of a stockpile like the US, or is it in the form of having diversified stockpiles around the region? So if one pathway to Australia gets cut off, we've got other points.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. It's why the Solomons is of concern, Tom.
Yeah, so you point out there's more than one way to do it, not just in Australia, but maybe that's the ultimate solution. Money, it always comes down